members and PS, Auditor General's representatives, and her team, and of course persons from the ministry, from Ministry of Science, Technology and Energy, from PCJ and from Petrojam. We have arrived here this morning to be met with a substantial amount of additional paper. We do not have the minutes of the last meeting yet. They are a work in progress, but the clerk to the committee has provided us with a brief meeting summary of the meeting last week. We have also been provided with an unsigned letter to the clerk, committee clerk, from the former permanent secretary of the ministry and now permanent secretary of the Ministry of Justice, responding to a request that the committee had submitted for the letter to Mr. Watson that she was to have written related to certain information that had been provided to the committee, which turned out to have been erroneous. The letter is not yet signed, but apparently the signed copy is on its way to us. But essentially what the letter says is that due to the transition of her role from one ministry to a new one, she did not address or action, as you put it. She did not action that matter. And she has said...
Chairman, just a minute here. You are saying that that letter is not signed?
No.
Well, it can't be entertained. Anything that's not signed is not official, you know.
Yes.
If it's not signed, there's no certainty that in fact the letter came from the former permanent secretary. No. Acknowledge the same time it took to do that letter could be signed. I believe we should wait until we get a signed copy. We can't deal with or address a document that's not signed. You yourself know as a lawyer, without a signature, it is invalid and have no use. So we should put it aside until we get a signed copy.
How did you receive it, man? Huh? It was apparently emailed by her to the clerk. I have
Yes,
no objection to waiting.
But we do have...
I'm only mentioning that it's here before us.
Well, don't only mention it until it's signed.
I've mentioned it already, member.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We don't go any further with it.
Yeah.
Because there's a method to sign a letter, even if it is emailed. Yeah. You have a method in which you can sign it. Yeah. So we should put it aside until we get an official one with a signature that we can talk about. Yeah. Because that can be denied at any time. That didn't come from the source.
Yes, well, it was emailed apparently. I don't mind deferring this until we actually get the signed copy. I'm only mentioning it because it was before us when we arrived here this morning. So it is we await the signed copy of this letter. You members can have a look at what is there in the interim. We also have here a letter to Parliament dated April 8th from Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, bringing to our attention certain documents which have been appended. There are 3 appendices to that letter. The second one is this huge file, which I don't think any of us have had a chance to look at, which was submitted to her, I believe, by Petrojam, with a cover letter, which is on the inside of the file jacket. So if members care to look at that, that one is signed. It's dated April 7th, addressed to Mrs. Palmer from Mr. Watson. And it says that what we have in this enormous file here is a compilation of Petrojam's responses to issues raised in the PAAC on Wednesday, June 13th, 2018. Those are issues not raised here, but were raised at that committee. Other issues raised outside of the PAAC Petrojam's response to the Auditor General findings of December 18 in that report, 2018, and Petrojam's response to PDVSA's audit of December 2017. So that is Appendix 2 referred to in the letter from the PS of April 8th to Parliament. Also, there are Appendix 1, which is a response to question raised, I think, by Member Jackson to do with Petrojam ethanol and motor vehicle loans to contract officers and the terms of those loans and whether or not the HR manager at Petrojam had signed off on those loans. So there's a response to that in Appendix 1. Again, it's just been tabled, so one hasn't had a chance to review it carefully. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chairman. I was just perusing the very said document that you made reference to, and there are a couple of questions that immediately comes to mind, even though I've not detailedly gone through it. But just reading the letter, you read in the first page, in fact, item 3, on the first page of the letter from Petrojam, letter dated the 5th of April.
From Petrojam ethanol.
From Petrojam ethanol, yes, to the permanent secretary. And it says, basically saying that the employee is a contract worker on a 3-year contract, and the motor vehicle loan was for a 28 months period. So one, it established that the employee is not a permanent employee, but a contract worker. The narrative in item 3 indicate about collective bargaining agreements and provisions made for staff members. The little difficulty I'm having there is that, is it the case that contract workers across the board enjoy benefits that accrue to permanent employee workers? Because it wants to suggest that. My understanding is that when you enter into a contract, all the benefits provided for are contained in that contractual arrangement. And the collective bargaining process would have established what benefits afforded those permanent employees. Mm-hmm. So I would have a little clarification on that.
Well, perhaps that can be clarified by the appropriate officer of Petrojam.
And whether or not it is sanctioned too by the Ministry of Finance. And further to that too, if whether the engagement of the incumbent in that capacity was sanctioned by the Ministry of Finance also.
And the incumbent to which you're referring is the Finance and Administration Manager?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Angela Smith.
Who's on a 3-year contract.
Yeah.
Yes. So the question is, were these benefits which were provided for, which are explained here as arising from the collective bargaining process, how is it that they were extended to persons who are contract officers? That's the first question. And specifically, in relation to this loan to the Finance and Administration Manager, who is on a 3-year contract, who authorized that particular loan? And was it, you're asking whether it was authorized by the Ministry of Finance?
Well, the employment of the officer in the position to begin with.
Oh, the employment of the particular officer.
But I must hasten to indicate, upon further perusal, as I indicated, never got the chance to go through it detailedly before. But in item 9, I'm seeing here, my colleague has brought it to my attention.
Item 9?
Item 9 in the contract.
In the contract?
Yeah, page 2.
Upon
successful completion of the employee's probationary period, she'll be eligible to participate in the, so that was a contract provision.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it was provided for in our contract?
In the contract.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Well, at this point, I think rather than attempt to address this now, we should let you in particular have some time to look
To go
through
through
this
it.
carefully.
Fair, fair.
Yeah, because it was an issue that you had raised. Yeah. And then there's Appendix 3, which is a letter, a lengthy letter from the chairman of the PCJ, Russell Hadid, to the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. That letter is dated April 8th, which is, I think, yesterday's date. And along with it is a listing of sponsorships approved by the chairman of PCJ and not ratified by the board. In regards to that, that is a matter, I think, addressed in Appendix 6 of the Auditor General's report, where she has listed those sponsorship awards. But before going into that in detail, P.S., I think last week you had indicated that you were awaiting some information to do with donations made by Petrojam itself, and there was a question as to whether it had been emailed or not, and so on. Have you had any? Is there any update on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Morning, everyone. First, let me also include in your you were not aware. Miss Angela Smith, who is acting general manager of PEL, Petrojam Ethanol Limited, is also in the team here today to address the questions relating to PEL. We have specific question about the information that was missing. I am to advise the committee, at the risk of being accused of misleading, that there was no email of the 22nd of March. The ministry received a letter dated the 22nd of March on the 25th of March, providing a list of donations by Petrojam. I immediately gave instructions for another letter to go to Petrojam because I did not consider the list providing me with information so I could address any questions raised here at the PAC, as I call it, to be properly interrogated and to give an appropriate response. And so that information now, sir, is included in this huge document that we received yesterday, and I want to apologize to the committee. I did receive your letter on Thursday from the clerk, expressing two specific questions. However, I felt that the information that was missing from the earlier submission, which I sent, I think, by letter dated March 11 to the Parliament, should be properly compiled, which was what I had intended in the first place, that we provide a fulsome response to the Auditor General's report. And so the information with the particulars in respect of donations is now in this huge binder, which I will allow at your direction, sir, for Mr. Watson to walk us through. To my best knowledge, I believe this is now complete, as I've been assured, and unless I come up with some other questions that my mind will lead me to, when I go back over the Auditor General's report, because I obviously have not had a chance to go through this documentation, save yesterday we diligently went through the document with Petrojam, and I pointed out the gaps, and we got it fixed. And so by nightfall, the binder was completed, and we were only able to send it here at start of business this morning. So let me sincerely apologize to the committee for the delay in providing the information, but I believe I have now been placed in a position to present a more fulsome response that I am more satisfied with to this committee.
Mr. Chairman, for clarity,
Yes.
should I take it, is it saying what was sent to us on the 11th of March, all of this is now included in this? That we are separate?
No, it's in what is in this is in addition to what is in the earlier bundle.
Yeah. But what is not immediately apparent is a kind of guide to this document. In other words, I know that they.
At the beginning,
Yeah.
Chairman.
Yes. It's
At the beginning of the binder.
Yes.
There is a document that takes you through.
So this report on initiatives, that document?
Yes, sir.
Report on initiatives to address findings.
Yeah.
So this is a kind of guide to it. All right. All right. Thanks for that. And this is a guide to what's in the document. Then. All right.
Chairman.
Yes, member.
And PS Petrojam has attested to the veracity of this document that they have sent to us.
Well, as you would notice, Member Chairman, the document is Petrojam's document. Mm-hmm. It is as submitted to me last night with over the letter from Mr. Watson. The document outlining what's contained is also issued by Mr. Watson. The entire document is a product of Petrojam. Nothing in this document was produced by the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology.
Therefore, could I ask a question then? I have perused one of the pages, and there's some information here that runs contrary to what was given to the committee sometime in last year and into this year, where in response to my question about Mr. Delroy Brown, the Chief Financial Officer, and was told then, the committee was told then that he was on garden leave. We do recall that term. But this document is saying the CFO was initially suspended for 5 days without due process. He was later terminated in April 2018. We are unable to locate Delroy Brown's file, and as such, supporting information is unavailable. Is this a fact, or is it part of what we have been trying to eke out of the group since this Auditor General's report has come before us? Because each sitting we go, we get information that, in large order, information that was not correct before. So I just want to make certain that this here is the actual fact that he was terminated in April 2018 as per this voluminous document, and not as we were told and supported by Hansard that he was on garden leave when we met some time ago in January 2019.
Which tab are you looking at?
HR Chairman.
HR.
Yes. Subject to Mr. Watson giving you precise times, what is there is correct, but he was brought back and he's now on garden leave. Yeah?
And his file is still not found?
No, not yet.
He was terminated and then brought back and put on garden leave?
That's correct. And we still don't have his file. We still cannot find his file.
Wow.
The HR manager that was terminated, you won't bring her back too? No, the one on the Christmas Eve firing. No, it's not something to laugh about. No, the lady, the last separation, the previous one. Her name. No. Yeah, the one that went to the IDT. The CFO was terminated. You created an injury right there in terminating the person. Nonetheless, you rescinded that decision of termination and brought him back into employment. Then the garden leave thing come about. I am saying that in the case of the HR manager that was summarily terminated on Christmas Eve in 2016, you terminated her, you created an injury, notwithstanding the settlement. Would you give consideration to correcting that injury that was made?
It has been corrected. It has been corrected so much so that
her matter went to the IDT and it was settled.
I don't see why the member
and it was settled, so I couldn't speak further to that.
How long has Mr. Watson, how long has Mr. Brown been on garden leave now? When was he brought back and when was he sent on garden?
So he went off, I would say about 6 months now, around
a lot of
September.
gardening.
He went off in September of last. No man, it's later than that. I think it's November of last year that he went off. So it'll be November, December, January, February, March, April. 6 months.
he came back in September.
It's still work in progress, member.
Members, before
it's being negotiated, members.
We have some people in the gallery visiting, and I should just acknowledge them. They are from the Faculty of Law at UWI, I'm told, 22 students, and 9 students from the Michael University College, along with a teacher. Welcome to you all. Yes.
Mr. Watson indicated that that matter has been settled already. The question you're asking about the former HR manager, or not the recent former, but the former. Just out of curiosity, you said it has been settled by the IDT.
That's correct.
Right? And Petroleum has settled. What is the settlement from, as the IDT indicated it, to Petroleum? What were the directives?
You mean for the former?
Yeah, man.
12 months. 12 months compensation.
12 months emolument.
Emolument.
What does emolument include?
Whatever salary and other benefits are. I would have to check exactly.
So the salary benefits would be things such as vacation pay. It would be motor vehicle, that sort of thing, that every person would be entitled to if they were being employed.
Well, I can check with the officer, our legal counsel, but remember, some of the benefits you would not be on site to get it. So
sorry, go again.
You would not, for instance, a duty allowance. If you're not at the refinery, then you're not incurring. So those will have to be worked out. So I'm not sure exactly what the emoluments, all the emoluments
incentive.
If you have worked for the period and you're appraised and you earn an incentive, then you're entitled to an incentive.
So essentially, if the employee was on site, not having been wrongfully dismissed, then that employee would have gained those benefits.
Well, let me put it to you this way, member. The matters, in as much as we have paid Ms. Scott Aaron some of the money that based on the IDT, I believe our legal counsel is still disputing some of it along the lines you are saying. So I'd rather not disclose it in public now. We can speak to it otherwise, though.
So
but it is still being disputed.
So you haven't, you haven't finalized the payment to her?
No, we finalized a payment, sorry, which we have made. But her
how much was that payment?
It was based on the 12 months compensation. But her lawyer is disputing some of the
so did you made the payment? You paid it?
Yes.
And how much did you pay?
She ended up net 6.5 million.
That's what you paid net?
That's the net figure I'm giving you. But it was based on 12 months compensation.
12 months compensation, 6.5 million net is what she
That's
received.
the net.
Net
Right.
of deductions?
Sorry?
Net of what? Salary deductions?
You take out like taxes, NIS, NHT, education,
Right.
tax, other deductions.
Those normal deductions.
Right. So her lawyer now is disputing some of that. So I'd rather we not get into that details
see.
here.
Mr. Chairman, this thing is distressing, to say the least. A lady that was unfairly dismissed end up without cause with a settlement of 6.5 million, and someone who was employed unqualified, improperly employed, right? Multiple charges against them. The PCJ enter into an arrangement for a settlement of over 2.5 times the amount, $15.5 million compared to $6.5 million by any stretch of the imagination, Mr. Chairman. That is injustice in the worst form.
But you went through that already.
I'm going to go over it again.
Yeah.
And again.
And again.
Mr. Chairman.
One second, members.
Look.
Members.
Remember, just to be correct, the settlement was 9 months. Ms. Scotteran is 12 months.
Just a minute.
It's not, right? The settlement, no. The IDT made a settlement for Ms. Scotteran at 12 months.
That's what you had said.
That's what. That's right.
Yes. Member Warmington.
Mr. Chairman, I've been thinking or wondering whether or not there had been an escape clause in the contract of the workers of Petrojam, because we constantly hear about settlements for this, settlement for that, settlement for that. And I'm looking at this contract here for Ms. Smith.
It's the Petrojam ethanol.
Yes.
Petrojam ethanol.
Yes, so what I'm asking where Petrojam is concerned, clause 20 makes it clear. And I just want the first one to look for in this contract. Because I know all of these contracts, you always have an escape clause. And it says right here, it's 3 months notice by either party, or if the employer terminates the employee, she receive 3 months pay in lieu of notice. So may I ask the question, was this escape clause included in those employees from Petrojam? Did they have an escape clause? There must be an escape. Was there an escape clause?
You mean termination clause? You mean?
Yes.
Are you calling an escape?
Yeah.
Remember, this contract is a temporary contract for one.
No, I didn't ask you about temporary, permanent. I asked a simple question. Was there a termination clause, escape clause in the contract for those workers at Petrojam? Is yes or no?
I would have to check.
No, Mr. Watson.
Hold on, let me check.
Hold on,
In any event, she was summarily dismissed.
Huh?
She was summarily dismissed.
Yes, but it's right here.
Yeah.
You can summarily dismiss
remember,
anybody.
I understand.
And with that 3 months compensation payment. So why, if you didn't have it for Petrojam, I don't understand.
No.
Every other government agency, or even in private practice, there is a termination clause where 3 months notice or 3 months salary. What I want to know, why this is missing from the contract of Petrojam.
It's not missing, member. There is a termination clause, but you still cannot just terminate with 3 months notice. You still have to go through a process.
Why do you think this is here? It says
No, it is.
It said 3
The
months
lawyers will
notice.
tell you that. You still have to go through a process. You cannot just do that.
No process was followed in Ms. Scott Heron's case. She was summarily dismissed. She took the matter to the IDT, and they've awarded her 12 months.
That's correct.
Compensation.
So the process was not followed in her case. That's correct.
But what is stark is the juxtaposition with how she has been compensated versus her successor's compensation. And that, I think, that point has been made quite forcibly already. Anybody else had wanted to say anything? Yes, Mr. Camp.
I think there's some misunderstanding in relation to these fixed-term contracts. They, albeit that there's a provision in there which says that you can give 3 months notice either way or in lieu of that you make a payment. The IDT has gone down a particular route now, which has said that, you know, unless you follow the procedure in getting in determining the person's contract, then this doesn't mean anything. These clauses are pretty much dead these days. Don't put them in there. It means nothing. You have to go through the procedure, follow the procedure of determining whether or not the person has defaulted. And if you determine that the person has defaulted, then you can determine. But you can't just use the provision. The code has now become part of the contract. It's incorporated by way of reference. So you can't really determine a person's contract by using these provisions in these contracts. It really it's gone out the window.
Essentially, yeah. If you don't follow the natural justice procedure embodied in the code, then you might have a finding of unjustifiable dismissal, and then the termination provision no longer governs what payments are due. Yeah. Yes. All right. Yes, Member Money.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 questions. The first is for the PS, now that she has had a chance to brief herself on the sponsorship documents from Petrojam. PS, have you been able, from the donation documents you have now received from Petrojam, have you been able to determine the basis on which PCJ director, not Petrojam director, PCJ director Lionel Myrie intervened by way of email to redirect the sponsorship from Citizens Association 1 to Citizens Association 2?
Chairman, so that we get this correct. Was the officer saying last week that Mr. Myrie redirected a payment? Because I think we first have to establish that he, in fact.
That is what the Auditor General's report.
My understanding is that he tendered a letter which was brought in from one of the officers operating in McCook's or one of those areas, but not that he intervened.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
The information so far provided to me suggests that Mr. Myrie did not make an intervention in his capacity as a director of the PCJ board.
What capacity did he do?
He spoke with me yesterday to, as in my own words, to clear the situation. And he said the documentation came to him in his capacity as a personal assistant to the then minister, and he then forwarded it to Petrojam. It was not, and he made it very clear, he was not acting in his capacity as a PCJ director.
Would that have been clear to the people receiving that intervention?
But also,
he was a PCJ director.
He said he was acting in the capacity of a personal assistant to the minister. So Mr. Myrie, the director of PCJ, is also a personal assistant to then Minister Wheatley?
He was at the time, yes.
And he is also employed to TPDCO? he was also
I don't know if those overlap, sir. I don't know.
But I must tell you, the arrangements, the personnel arrangements are passing strange. And along that line, I want to return to since we are looking at some of the HR issues, the Auditor General's report on page 88, 714. And here she draws our attention to another instance where a business intelligence support officer was engaged on July 3rd with emoluments of $7 million without the approval of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. She also noted that this business intelligence support officer was employed without an interview, without a reference check, and the post was not advertised. First of all, PS, could you say who is this person, and what is their name, and are they still employed at Petrojam?
No, this employment is PCJ, sir.
Or PCJ.
And I do not have those details, so Mr. Richardson will take the question.
Mr. Richardson?
The Auditor General's report, page 88.
Page 88.
Yeah, on page 88. Morning, everyone. You're just asking the name of the individual?
Yes.
I believe it's Sheila Balfour.
Sheila
Miss
Balfour.
Sheila Balfour.
Miss
Yes.
Sheila Balfour.
Is the individual.
Could you give me, I didn't get a surname.
Balfour. Sheila Balfour.
Balfour?
Yes.
Balfour?
Yes.
And is this person still employed to PCJ?
She's still employed to the PCJ. The project that she's working on is still active.
So could you explain how this person came to be employed, since she was employed without an interview, without a reference check, and the post was not advertised?
I'll certainly outline in summary how the person was taken on board. The PCJ had need for a short-term consultant. There was a particular need at the PCJ, and through discussions with, I think, Mr. Watson was involved in those discussions as well, the chairman, the group CFO, a couple of persons were identified, if I'm not mistaken. I think at least three persons were identified, and all were interviewed, mostly by the group CFO at the time, and on his determination, and also with discussions with Mr. Watson, settled on one individual, Ms. Balfour, because of her years of experience.
The short-term contract still continues almost 2 years later. This short-term contract you're referring to. July will make 2 years.
It does.
July 3rd will make 2 years.
It does, because the business need is still there. But I could certainly speak with, have you speak with the HR manager so she can enlighten you a little bit more with regards to why. But the reason for it is because there's still a business need. We're trying to close, and that's why we're there with that.
There's still need for business intelligence support.
Yes.
But I imagine there's always, business intelligence support is something that a company will need ongoing.
Ongoing.
So I'm not sure how you justify it on the basis of a short-term exigency. I just, it continues, Mr. Chairman. The HR policies and practices, I shouldn't even say so much the policies, because the policies seem fine. It's just that the policies are not adhered to. But the practices are just all over the place. People just seem to do as they like. And it's very difficult to understand the real motivations behind some of these. If you look on the other page 87, it has a table of posts filled without advertisement, without interviews, without assessments. Senior Human Resource Officer. And these are at PCJ, by the way. This is not Petrojam. These are new things we're learning of. Senior Human Resource Officer, March 2017, not advertised, no evidence of interview or assessment. Business Intelligence Support, which I just spoke to. LNG Consultant, no ad. Secretary, Legal and Procurement, no ad. Executive Assistant, Business Development Consultant, Program Support, no ad. LNG Admin Assistant, no ad, no interview, no assessment. ICA Digitization Officer, no ad, no interview, no assessment. I mean, why bother have a policy around these things at all?
So who is responsible for this approach to hiring fairly senior people where there's really no transparency and there's no proper process for ensuring that you're getting the best person available, and which facilitates nepotism and corruption? Who's responsible for that?
Well, with regards to responsibility for hiring, it ultimately resides with the manager of HR and also with the board subcommittee of HR.
Who is the manager of HR?
Currently, Karen Elliott, who's here with me. At the time when most of these activities, I think it was another individual at the time as well.
Who was that other individual?
Kirk Johnson, yes.
And when did the current person assume the post of head of HR?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Elliott, and I assumed the position of Human Resource Manager, April 2018.
When in 2018, sir?
April 2018.
And were you responsible for any of the three from April 2018 as indicated by my colleague? PCJ, IP Program Support, LNG Admin Assistance, and ICA Digitization Officer. Were you involved in...
You have the document here? You're seeing it?
Yes, I'm seeing it. I was involved in the recruitment of the 3-month contract for the PCJ IP support. The ICA Digitization Officer was a renewal of contract that was issued at that time. And which other one did you indicate?
That was May 2018.
This also was a renewal of contract. So the LNG admin assistant, for example, would have had a 3-month contract that was extended because there was the need as the business purpose was continuing.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I have a curious question. I heard the response that those instances were renewal. And I want the PS to guide me here. Where someone was engaged improperly, and it's established, breach policy, procedure, qualification issues were not addressed, but they are unstaffed. Upon discovery of those breaches, are you bound to continue in that what you'll deem illegitimate, improper engagement?
My view is no, sir. As I discussed with the team yesterday morning, as we discussed the Attorney General, Auditor General's report and the issues that we still face, I have made it very clear that we must return to the proper policies that govern operations. For example, one point that came up was that, there was a business need, and so you go ahead and you fill the position. And I pointed out that there is a requirement for the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to approve positions. So, yes, you may seek approval for short-term engagement, but any intention for longer-term engagement must require an appropriate submission to the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service for approval for that post to be a part of the establishment. This is the challenge that we now face, as I have now been provided by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the establishment of all the bodies within the portfolio and I am going through with a fine-tooth comb to establish the irregularities because it has to be remedied. It cannot be that you just decide that you need more people and you have money, so you go ahead and totally oblivious of the policy direction that you must obtain from the government, and you get that through the ministry that has portfolio responsibility for your entity. This appears to be the practice, and so I hope it has been received, and you know, I shall be writing about it. I have started already to indicate that the process must be observed, yes, or else the appropriate sanctions must therefore be applied. It cannot be that we continue business as usual, which is all unusual in my estimation as I delve into this process now 9 weeks on the job. It's a challenge.
9 weeks.
Yes.
No, I'm not complete. I just need further. Pierce, I heard you. I heard you. And what I basically gather is that going forward, you are going to seek to ensure that these guidelines, policy guidelines, are adhered to.
It is required, sir.
Required. But specifically, PS, what I'm interested in, if somebody is engaged on a 2-year or 3-year contract, which breach all the engagement requirement, you discovered it in 6 months down the road, 1 year, does it mean that the contract remains valid though the procedure was breached in virtually all areas? Because, you know, PS, it's like somebody enter your house improperly or illegally without permission. Break the door and they're inside. They're going to say, since you're already in here, stay in here.
Not quite, member. It's not quite the same thing. Because the person may or may not be aware of the process to engagement. And I would have to take legal advice on the matter because the person would have a legitimate contract entered into with the entity. So the issue would be, what is the legal remedy to solve the problem? And then you would have to do the cost-benefit analysis of, do you let the contract go its course, or do you seek to terminate the contract, and what are the implications of that, which is part of the exercise I'm doing now in an event. Yes, because we have to cauterize it somewhere.
Are you responsible for facilitating the breach?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Witter, and then Mrs. Flynn.
Yes, PS, with respect to temporary employment, if you have special projects within a department, do you have to seek the approval of the Ministry of Finance for special projects?
It is my view, sir, that all additional employment over and above the establishment set by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service should at least get an indication from that ministry that you may go ahead. That's what I do in the ministry when I lead, because I prefer to err on the side of caution than to go ahead on a frolic of my own.
No, I know sometimes these special projects are funded by other agencies and departments. So how would you treat with that?
Yes, sir. Projects are funded by mostly international donors in bilateral arrangements, and the government of the day, both past and present, has established that the Planning Institute of Jamaica coordinates all activities for getting into these arrangements. And so, if we are doing it properly, then the Ministry of Finance would also be engaged in this process. And so, you know, we tend sometimes to use expedience to cover what we do. But this is the government's business, this is the nation's business, and we need to do it properly, right? And it is my experience, 14 years as a permanent secretary, that I seek guidance, at the very least. I get guidance. So yes, PS, you may go ahead and do that, and normally I want it in writing so that it cannot be said, who told you that? Yes? So whether it's short term or whatever it is, we need to use the proper processes, because in the fiscal arrangements of the country, the macroeconomic arrangements, the Ministry of Finance need to be able to account for everything. We are not running private entities. This is public business, and we have to do it properly.
Thank you. Mr. Swinton, do you want to answer?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it was a similar question as Member Bunton had pointed out about the short-term contract. Is there any policy that you have in regards to how long a short-term contract is? And if it is that you're saying that the person is still there, is it that the job is not yet finished? And will there be any clause put in, or how do you move, going forward? How would you then, state that type of policy regarding short-term contracts?
Mrs.
There
Elliott.
is a policy in place at the PCJ, and I'll certainly ask Ms. Elliott to give us a little bit more background on that if required. But I think 12 months is the period for short-term contracts, and I think you can extend if there is justification. So there's 12 months, and with justification you can extend.
These contracts that were renewed, Mrs. Elliott, you indicated that the contracts that under your watch are listed here were actually renewals of contracts. How long have they been running for, these 3-month recurring contracts? How long have they gone on for, from inception to ultimate end? Or are they still in place?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so the LNG admin assistant, there is a correction there. It's actually a 1-year contract that started in May 2018. And this was as a need for the new LNG initiative that the corporation was undertaking. We needed some additional support to the manager there. This contract is still continuing as the needs are, as I indicated before, continuing as well. As it relates to the digitization officer, this project started in 2015. I can verify that. I think I just verified with my CAC manager who runs the project. And the project still continues, and so what we do is to renew. We give for like 6 months, and then if it's not completed, we renew for an additional 6 months. So these are under 6-month contracts.
So these short-term contracts can actually end up lasting years and years and years.
Well, what I can posit is that we have subsequently reviewed and we're in the process of, or has been in the process of writing the ministry to seek approval for the project or the continuation of the employment. It is estimated that the project is going to be completing in another year or so. So
the LNG admin assistant was not a renewal, but was a new contract.
Right, it was an initial contract that was initiated in May 2018, and it should end May 2019.
And that post was advertised? What was the process that was followed? Was the person interviewed? According to this, no interview or assessment was seen for that person. And no advertisement, no advertisement was placed. Is that correct?
You are correct.
And why was that?
No. Let me just respond to the LNG first. The PCJ currently have under one of its programs the graduate internship program. The graduate internship program exposes individuals who have finished university to working experience. And so this individual was under the graduate internship program. We trained this person who would have now honed the skill, has the skill set. When the need arose for this position, it was an urgent one, and because of the short nature of the contract, we decided to utilize the skill set of the person who we just trained to be able to complete this project. The individual would have been interviewed initially for the graduate internship program, that is a part of the requirement. After she had completed the graduate internship program, an assessment was done, an evaluation of her performance over the period, and so the hiring managers thought that she fit the qualification requirements for same.
But Chairman, if I may, you said earlier on that you supervised that particular employment in May 18, 2018, having arrived there about 2 months earlier. The question is, and you subsequently said just now, that an assessment would have been done of that individual as at the end of the graduate entry program, and because of the exigency of the need for that post to be filled, that assessment was looked at. But it says here that nothing is seen on the interview or assessment, not seen. So is it that is there and not provided, or is not available?
Member, let me take that one, and Karen can back me up as required.
Sorry?
Let me take that one. With regards to our review, as we're going through all the processes based on what the PS just said, to ensure that we align what we do at the PCJ with what is understood throughout the rest of the GOJ. We've been looking back, we've been finding evidence that there is some amount of interview that was done. I recall one going through it with Karen, the notes were made on the back of the CV. What we have recognized is that the formality of it wasn't done, and unfortunately what we've put in place now is to ensure that we correct those. And so what we're looking to do ultimately is to reconstitute all the files that we have within the HR department to attest. So if someone did an interview, I know I've done a couple of the interviews, I know I've done the assessments, and I'm not seeing them on the file. So we're going to do an attestation in essence to put those back on the file to say, yes, these were done.
So you're saying technically, Mr. Richardson, that they weren't there, but you're now in the process of putting them in place?
Like I said, I know I've done some of those assessments and they cannot be located on the file, and so I'm taking the step to ensure that we can put or reconstitute the files so they're appropriate.
Chairman, it's another matter, but related to HR.
Well, hang on with that. You wanted to say something on this?
Just a clarification. This graduate program that was mentioned, what's the value of it?
Sorry?
Would you repeat, please, member? I didn't hear.
No, I heard mention earlier on about the graduate program that was mentioned. Yeah, you had mentioned it, or the lady behind you?
Well, I can answer it as well. The graduate internship program is an annual program that the PCJ, PCJ does, that we look at the universities and get someone just out of university, to give them work experience, that help them to build their CV up.
What's the value of that program?
The budget allocated for it annually is $14 million, and we hire just about 10 or 11 persons.
Okay.
Dr. Guy, and then Mr.
Thank you. I am seeking some clarification on a matter. I'm not aware, not certain it was discussed last week at the last meeting, but it is something, PS and Chairman, which comes under the answer to question 2C, and it makes reference to Appendix C. We were told some time ago at...
Sorry, Dr. Guy, which document?
This is the first document that came from the Ministry of Science and Technology.
The first bond.
Mm-hmm. First bound, yes. We were told some time ago that the matter of the final decision of Petrojam to go to that particular determination for the disassociation of the HR manager, the last one, was based on legal advice. Can you say who is the external counsel for Petrojam?
In this matter, it was Samuda and Johnson.
Samuda and Johnson. All right. I find it a little curious, though, that the letter that is in this first document, there is an email of February 7, 2019, which purports to come from a lawyer who had given legal advice as well, oral advice.
Sorry, member, can I just, it's Samuda Johnson as well as Angela Roberts.
And how long has that Angela Robertson worked for Petrojam?
I don't know, for several years.
For several years, all right. But Mr. Watson, and whether it's a legal officer is going to advise on this particular one. This document, based on the date of the email, came subsequent to questions being asked in this Parliament about the legal advice given. We're told, yes, we're told then that there was advice from the lawyer, which is documented here in August, coming from Samuda and Johnson, right? But we are only curiously seeing that an email was sent in February 7, 2019, alluding to confirmation of oral advice given re-IDT HR manager Petrojam. Question I want to ask, one, is this a CYA chairman? Right? Because the thing is, I'd like to know when was this lawyer paid for this particular piece of advice? Because it would have had to be given around the time in the latter part of last year when the HR manager was terminated. And I find it curious now that Petrojam is putting this months after as the basis for their decision to go that particular route. February 7, 2019, right? When was this lawyer paid for this advice? Because I would think, and quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, if an oral opinion is given, I would have expected that Petrojam would have given that particular attorney certain documents for a decision or an advice to be given. But it was done orally. Question, this is not a decision about what you're going to shop and ask for an oral advice from somebody, your grocery bill and that sort of thing. This is a serious state matter. So there has to be some chain of communication, some documents exchanged along the way, counsel, right? Now, this oral advice that was given, the question I want to know, when was this paid for and what was the invoice document for that particular time? Was it after February 7, 2019 or prior to February 7, 2019? That's the first question.
Before we go any further, let's have the answer.
Yes.
We have Samuda and Johnson's letter of August 14th,
yes,
2018 last year, addressing various HR issues, including the HR manager.
And they gave a comprehensive...
Yeah.
Yes.
And going through what they...
Our legal counsel, Mrs. Robinson,
yes,
will speak to the matter.
Yes, Ms. Robinson. And then we have this email of February 7th, 2019 from Angela, who I assume is Angela Robinson? Angela Robertson?
That's correct.
Yeah. Referring to some oral advice that was given, which seemed to have been crucial in how you decided to proceed.
And remembered very well to Chairman.
Good morning, members. Tamara Robinson, Legal Officer, Corporate Secretary for Petrojam. In relation to the question about whether when the advice was paid for, the practice of that attorney is to await the finalization of matters before issuing bills. That being said, we have received an invoice from her, and we received it in March as we're trying to close off all outstanding legal bills for the period 18-19. So we received her invoice covering the period August 2018 to March 2019 in March.
When was this oral advice given? And you know, it's curious too, because I've spoken to 3 attorneys. One is a QC, and no, not the Kwashi Council. And I read the first part of the letter to that particular attorney. Dear Tamara, further to our discussion, and I'm told that usually those lawyers who are worth their salt would say of such and such a date in relation to the above mentioned matter. Curiously, this document doesn't have a date on it as to when this oral discussion took place. And hence my suggestion, Chairman, that is a CYA.
What is CYA?
Cover your ass. That's what it is. He asked me what it is, whether it's parliamentary or unparliamentary.
Yeah. All right, let's not have a fuss over that. So, Miss Robinson, when was this oral advice given?
That oral advice was given during the course of the settlement discussions and during the preparation of the cost-benefit analysis.
And when was that?
That would have been in November 2018.
So, question, having received advice from Samuda and Johnson, given in writing in the normal way, in relation to this particular matter and advising that disciplinary proceedings should follow and so on, why is it that you now switched to another attorney and received oral advice, which led to this settlement?
Chairman, there was no switching of attorneys. Mm-hmm. Both attorneys advised us throughout the matter, both orally and in writing. We did receive oral advice from Samuda and Johnson throughout. You would appreciate that it was an active matter and not every juncture lent itself to a formal written opinion being provided. We had asked Mrs. Robertson to confirm her advice given to us, and she graciously did so in February of 2019. If it is that the members are suggesting that the advice was not given at the time, I'm not sure that I'm in a position to say much more on it, except to say that I have no doubt in my mind that that was when we received the advice, that is November 2018, and Mrs. Robertson could also come to update the committee on whether or not she provided that information at that time.
So you received advice at that time from both sets of attorneys?
Yes, we received advice from both sets of attorneys in relation to, well, not in relation to the cost, yes, in relation to the cost-benefit analysis, yes, we received advice from both attorneys. So the figures, for example, Samuda and Johnson was I would say the front attorney in relation to sitting with us in the disciplinary hearing, so they were the ones who provided the figures and so on. We also got advice from them in relation to the likely outcome before the IDT. We cross-checked that, as we had been doing throughout the matter, to make sure that we got fulsome legal advice with the more senior counsel in the practice area. And we went with the advice of the senior counsel.
So it wasn't a switch then?
There was no switch.
Thank you.
Save and accept that there's no reference in the bundle to any oral advice being given by Samuda and Johnson. We have a letter. What has been put before us is a fulsome letter of August 14th last year and an email of February 7th this year by 2 different attorneys. Now you're saying that you were receiving oral advice from both throughout the matter.
So in relation to what you have from Ms. Robertson, because we relied on her advice in relation to the chances of success, we asked her to document that. In a prior sitting, there was a document called the Chronology of Separation of the HR Manager, and throughout there are references to legal advice which we received, and that actually documents oral advice that we received throughout the course of the matter.
Well, I'm looking at that chronology here. It's in the bundle.
Right. So, for example, we're talked about the Administrator General's findings in respect of the breaches from the HR manager. You'll note.
Auditor General?
Yes.
Auditor General, sorry.
Right.
You said Administrator General.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Auditor General, what could we have done? The Auditor General's report having come out, and we were in the midst of a hearing, you'll note there that it indicates that the legal advice was that notwithstanding the findings of the Auditor General, it was not sufficient for us to terminate the contract. And I think there are also 2 other instances of legal advice which we received. That was oral, and we documented it for that purpose of putting it in the chronology.
You didn't put a footnote as to who provided that legal advice?
No, but I could clarify that if you wish. But we would have got them from both attorneys.
So you're receiving advice from both attorneys all through this process?
That's correct.
Yes.
I'm just saying that, I said it earlier on, and I'm still going to say it and maintain it. This is almost like a dental practice in getting the right information and in pulling it. It's almost like pulling teeth to get the information, the correct information. No, seriously. We have seen, well, I'm from the country. I've seen where we have gotten information, which as a next sitting it has been changed. And quite frankly, Chairman, I do not know what to believe now. I don't know if any of my colleagues have that concern as well. The difficulty, my colleague, is that we keep getting changing answers each time we sit. That is my difficulty.
Ask the chairman to have the particular witness sworn in, and then we prosecute.
Anyway, I think, remember one thing you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just reflecting on some of the answers that I got to my first 2 questions, and I think I need some further clarification. Could you remind me the name of the HR manager?
Elliott. Mrs. Elliott.
Karen Elliott.
Mrs. Elliott? Yes. Mrs. Elliott, coming back to those lists of persons that we were talking about in HR that many were employed without the post being advertised, or there was no evidence of interviews or evaluations. You said apart from the last 3 which were renewals, Kirk Johnson was the person, he was what, the HR manager who was responsible for employing them?
That would be correct, in addition to the acting individual who would have acted for about 5 months. And
who was that?
Pardon?
Who was that person?
The acting HR manager prior to me would have been Gene Encino.
Okay, and Mr. Johnson is no longer there? And could you tell me when he left?
No, he's no longer there, and he left in November 2017.
November 2017. Okay, so I'm going to kind of combine this with the information that the PS gave. So we have, Mr. Chairman, somebody who was the minister's personal assistant, Lionel Myrie, operating also as a director of the Petroleum Corporation, giving instructions around sponsorships, and I believe also about employment at PCJ. I imagine in his, well, it's difficult to understand which cap he was wearing at what time, but
Can you clarify given instructions?
well, the Auditor General.
Remember, I'm asking you, you said given instructions, so I'm just trying to follow your conversation.
The Auditor General's report says that the email came from the PCJ director Mr. Lionel Myrie to disregard the donation to Citizens Association 1 and to replace it with a letter for the same amount, or to transfer the same
check.
The check.
No,
to cancel
I want
that
to hear
check
him first. Yeah.
and to issue it and to make that payment to Citizen Association 2. So it's not, I am saying that. This was
No, can you just point us to the section of the Auditor General's report where she makes reference to the fact of Mr. Myrie having given instructions?
We read it at the last meeting, which you weren't here, but we can find it.
For those of us who are less learned.
It is on page 69. Page 69. No, perhaps if you would do your background reading, you wouldn't have to be asking me where, but go to page 69. Go to page 69, 414, and the sentence, which the relevant section of the sentence, a board member of PCJ submitted to Petrojam's general manager the letter from Citizens Association number 1 cancelling its request and the new request from Citizens Association number 2.
And that we asked last time in your absence, because you didn't show up, for part of it he was present. I don't know if he missed this part. And we asked, who is the person referred to here? And we were told it was Mr. Myrie. Now we were told that there was a conversation between the PS and Mr. Myrie yesterday or recently, where he sought to explain himself, and he said he wasn't wearing his PCJ director hat when he made that intervention. He was acting as the special assistant to the minister. That's what we were told.
Well, can we have the benefit, Chairman, of the correspondence which is said to have gone from Mr. Myrie?
No, Mike.
Can we have the benefit of the correspondence which is said to have gone from Mr. Myrie to Petrojam?
So are you saying you're doubting the Auditor General?
Yes.
That she invented this?
Because we have had a clarification from the officer to say that the finding of the Auditor General that there was in fact no interview. We've had that contradicted. So let us have the benefit of...
No. I didn't hear any contradiction.
No contradiction about interview.
There was no contradiction.
Did say that
there was
an
no
interview.
contradiction. There was a clarification.
There was an interview when the person began as a student in the graduate student program. There was no interview around her employment to this contract. So there was no inconsistency whatsoever in that regard. But if you'd like to see this letter, I have no problem asking for it.
The letter where Mr. Myrie is said to have sought the intervention.
It's an email.
It's an email of July 5th.
So where is that email, which is where Mr. Myrie?
It may be in this enormous bundle. I don't know.
If I may.
Yes, but don't let us malign people where we don't have.
There's no what maligning. I am quoting from the Auditor General
report.
Chairman.
The Auditor General did not name Mr. Myrie in the exchange last. Where's the nexus between what was said by the officer last week and what is contained in that report?
Mr. Campbell.
Are we sure that
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell, we went through 414 last week. And the question we went through.
He was here also. I don't know what you're talking about.
Please, order. We went through 414 last week. We asked the question, who is the PCJ director referred to here? And we were told it was Mr. Myrie. You want to see the email? I would like to see it too. If they could please produce it, we'd be grateful.
The Chairman, the email is actually in the package you have there. The email is in there.
You have there too, Mr. Campbell.
Could you direct us to the email?
It's under the donation. It's under the donation policy. I'd have to.
It's under the what? What
yes,
one?
I got this morning.
Sorry.
We all got it
Appendix 2 under the donation policy. Appendix 2 under the donation policy. So in your binder, there's a section, a tab marked donation. Yes.
May I? Mr. Chairman,
But it's a lot of information, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
So,
may I ask a simple question here? Reference been made here just now about Mr. Lionel Mary being an assistant to the minister and PCJ. Where we got the information that he was assistant to the minister? That he was assistant to the minister. He was never an assistant to the minister. He was never an assistant to the minister. Didn't hear that? He was never an assistant to the minister. Yes, you will in web and all that, like Brother Nancy. You will you will in web. You see, tie you up already?
Yes,
none of this, the web you're weaving. It didn't work at all last week, Thursday.
That's a different web.
That is what you're weaving. And all you're doing here is to get traction there. You didn't get none last week. You're not getting none next week, you know?
That's a different web. You come out on this web now.
You wait till you come with the other two. You're going to see. You're going to get the same result.
All I'm seeing thus far is a letter of July 5th from the McCook's Pen Citizens Association indicating that they don't need this money after all, under the signature or purported signature of Ashami and White. I'm not seeing the email that's referred to in the Auditor General's report.
Much further along, Mr. Chairman, there's an email.
Okay.
There's an email here or
right.
Copy of a screenshot.
So there was an email sent to former General Manager Floyd Grinley, the one who we haven't been able to locate, from Lionel Myrie, dated July 5th, 2017, saying, please see attachment on behalf of McCook's Pen. And I assume that attachment is the letter of that same date as that email, saying that they no longer wanted the sponsorship money from Petrojam. And Mr. Floyd Grinley forwarded that to Miss Ramharak and a lady called Latoya Pennant, saying, please see attached for your records. Please prepare board submission documents to use the already approved funds for this new request. Sydenham Citizens Association. Need documents to take with me to board tomorrow. So it was...
Yeah, so are you now satisfied, member?
What I'm asking, who is it that... the question I'll continue to ask is, where is that submission that Mr. Myrie is alleged to have made? He didn't.
No, that was not your question. That's a new question.
He was merely forwarding something which is. You're saying that he made an intervention, and I want.
He sent an email.
Yes, which.
He sent an email to the general manager of Petrojam.
Yes.
Attaching a letter.
A letter from whom?
It says, please see attachment on behalf of McCook's Pen.
There was no instructions given to say. Did he give an instruction in that letter that he forwarded? I think that is where.
Why do you think he sent it, member?
No, I mean, but no.
Why do you think he
you're a
sent
lawyer.
it?
Did he give instructions?
And I think I want to.
I'm sitting here listening. I'm saying, did he give instructions?
Well, the point I'm making is if Mr. Myrie did not do that, in his capacity as a director of PCJ, then he must have done it in his capacity as the personal assistant to the minister.
In what capacity did he do it?
The permanent secretary said earlier in this same meeting today that Mr. Myrie spoke with her yesterday and said that he was not sending this in his capacity as a PCJ director, that he was sending it in his capacity as personal assistant to then Minister Wheatley.
So he gave a letter too.
Right. Yes. Yes.
I get a letter and I pass it on, and that's my
So what is it?
Right. So, if you would allow me to finish the point, I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, that this is where we get a breakdown or a collapse of the supposed separation between policy and operations. The minister is the policy leader of the ministry. But when his personal assistant is inserted into the operational agencies as a director and is giving instructions or passing things on, let us say, passing things on which are interpreted as an instruction, then what we find is this is where good governance breaks down, because the separation between policy and operation. That's why we have a permanent secretary in the ministries, because they are the accounting officers in charge of the administrative side of the ministry. The minister is a policy leader. He's not supposed to get down into the weeds of instructing which citizen association is to get what donation.
But that is not true.
But what is not true?
What you just said.
It's what I call an economy of truth.
Well, give me another explanation of why the minister's assistant would send an email with a letter purportedly from Makuk Penn Citizens Association saying we no longer want the donation and it must be redirected to another citizen association within the same minister's constituency. Give me another plausible explanation for that.
There is none.
There is none.
Absolutely none.
So we don't come here to try and obfuscate or defend the indefensible. What we're trying to do is to learn from what has happened so that these things do not take place again.
So trying to deny.
Yes, trying to deny what happened.
It's really not becoming of a member.
I think what is clear best practice that we can take from this, Mr. Chairman, is that where ministers have personal staff in a ministry, it is not appropriate for those same persons to then act as directors or employees of agencies within the same ministry for which the minister has portfolio responsibility, because it short circuits that separation between policy and operations.
And it facilitates political interventions, which can in fact result in the deployment of resources.
Absolutely.
Which is what has happened here.
And I don't know if that is if somehow the members are arguing against that best practice, which I'm trying to distill from our experience here, which we all agree we don't want to see repeated.
Regardless of which government used to do it before.
And if I may ask,
always, you know that with me.
Mrs. Flynn.
I think with all of this being said, I want to find out, with everything that the member has stated, and with all the issues arising from this Petrojam, what I want to find out is how, as far as policy, what are we going to be doing going forward, especially with something like this?
Put in place that there won't be any reoccurrence. So why every week we're asking the same question and we get the same answer from the people? Stop badger the accounting officers. Stop badger them.
Member Warmington, please allow the PS to respond to Mrs. Flynn's question. And Mrs. Flynn has asked a question, PS, about
I heard the question, yes, Mr. Chairman. And I will say that, no, that's okay, member. The Auditor General put forward several recommendations One, issues relating to the ministry and how it improves the responsibilities that it has to its bodies that are part of the portfolio. And we are right now putting those in place to include, as I indicated, the membership of the ministry on the boards so that there can be proper reporting to the ministry and, of course, to the minister, so that whatever needs to be handled by the ministry is appropriately handled. There will be, as recommended by the Auditor General, the training of boards as we implement our new boards, and there will be, by these boards, the establishment of the several frameworks that the Auditor General's report has recommended. We shall be seeing that all of this is done and that the ministry carries out its responsibilities, because it cannot continue business as usual.
Well, we look forward to that. Mr. Campbell.
Yes. Having received the report from the Auditor General, and with all the breaches that she's outlined, has she given you an undertaking to then go back to do these interviews with the people involved to determine whether or not the corrective measures have been put in place? And can you give us a timeline as to when she has indicated that she'll so do?
The Auditor General hasn't given me any such undertaking, but my experience with the Auditor General's department is that they go back and they verify. They unfortunately have not had the opportunity to verify the information that I have gotten, because I am only just now sending it in. But it would be very strange for me if the Auditor General doesn't go back. I think the timing is a function of their resources, and the Auditor General's department can speak to it for themselves. But it is my experience with the Auditor General, so I would not have sought to get a date, that they would go back, having received the responses from the entities, and to go and verify, and at their own planning, they will do further audits to inform the process going forward. And I look forward to that work, because the reports of the Auditor General will assist me as accounting officer to discharge my functions, even while I seek to put things in place to do it myself, so that the mechanisms are in place to monitor these entities that are within the portfolio.
Yes. PS, I have before me now the signed letter by the former PS addressed to the committee clerk and dated April 8th. This relates to some information that had been provided to the committee by Mr. Watson, no doubt relying on information provided to him, but he had provided information to us which turned out to be erroneous, and a request was made of her as to what she's going to do about the fact that we were provided erroneous information. She says that because of her transitioning to another ministry, she was unable to action this matter. And she says, in light of the above, and having regard to the placement of the energy portfolio under the stewardship of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, Mrs. Carol Palmer, I have now brought the matter to her attention, requesting that she treats with same as she deems appropriate. So, is this something you're aware of or seized of at this time?
I only received the communication from the former Permanent Secretary this morning, so I am totally unaware of it. So I would have to be informing myself. I did speak with her to get a clarification, because it was not contained in my brief that I got when I assumed responsibility. And so, sir, I'm unable to take you further. I would have to be properly advised on this matter.
This letter has just come in its signed form, so I'm not surprised you need some time to address
Pace,
it. Member Warmington?
the one you received from the phone, Pace, was that signed?
I'm sorry.
No, the communication from you say you received it this morning.
Yes, it was received by email, a cover letter unsigned, which I pointed out to her in my response, and with the minutes of the PAC attached. So I wrote back seeking clarification. I spoke with her, and it was not contained in my brief. So I am just being made aware of that this morning.
So you have not received anything officially because it's not signed. So we've already been signed not officially, the same thing came here. And now my concern, if it cannot be signed and delivered now, why couldn't it be signed this morning? And I believe anyone in authority ought to know that you have to affix your signature to any letter, any correspondence that leaves your office in an official capacity. Look here.
Members, given this issue with Mr. Myrie and the email and the letter and so on, I would like to suggest that we invite him to come here so he has an opportunity to explain himself in the committee. He's had a conversation with the permanent secretary, but I think it's only fair to him and to us that he be available to come here so we can give him that opportunity. We would summon him to attend the next meeting, if you could activate that, so we can give him that opportunity.
Summon or invite?
Well, summon him. Yeah. Members, in the other appendix that is attached to the letter from the permanent secretary to the Parliament of the April the 8th, which included this large appendix as Appendix 2. It had the information in it in relation to the Petroleum ethanol loan matter. But there's also an Appendix 3. And perhaps we could have a look at that. Members, Appendix 3 to this document here, which is the PCJ sponsorships. It's headed Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica sponsorships approved by the chairman and not ratified by the board. And there is a fairly long list of donations, or sponsorships rather, that were approved by the chairman of PCJ without CAC evaluation. Perhaps we could be reminded what CAC stands for as an acronym.
Corporate Affairs and Communication.
Corporate Affairs
Corporate Affairs and Communication.
And is that a committee? What is that?
It's a department or a unit of the PCJ.
It's a unit within the company.
Yeah.
All right. So these are a series of sponsorships that the chairman. Now, just remind me, in the case of PCJ, the senior executive of PCJ is what? A general manager? What is it? What is that person? What is the top executive position called within PCJ?
It's a group general manager.
Group general manager, yes. So the chairmanship is a non-executive chairmanship role.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Yeah. All right. The chairmanship is a non-executive chairmanship. So we have sponsorships here listed in Appendix 3, for which were neither ratified by the board nor were they evaluated by that CAC department, Corporate Affairs and Communications Department. And we have a series of them, $100,000, $100,000, $1 million. That million is to Tivoli Gardens Football Club. 500,000, 500,000 to Homestead Society, 500,000, and the list goes on. 750,000, $5 million. Imagine a $5 million sponsorship approved by a chairman without going through evaluation by the committee or being ratified by the board. $2,563,996 and $600,000, totaling $11.6 million that this chairman, a non-executive chairman, took it on himself to approve without board ratification and without evaluation by the CAC department. Sorry? That's on one page of a list which we have in Appendix 3, a list of 3.5 pages.
Third page.
So those are the ones which and then when we go down further, on page 3 of that list, there are some more sponsorships listed which neither had board ratification nor were they evaluated by the CAC department. That's a duplication. It's the
In some
it's the
instances, but there are additional on it.
Oh yes, there are some. Oh yes, taking it up to 15 million. So, for example, there is $1 million for Humble Lion Football Club, and what appears to be so this chairman.
Where's St. Simon Primary?
Where is St. Simon Primary? Does anyone know where St. Simon Primary is?
Not. I believe it's in Hanover, sir. That's what I'm being told. But
where?
In Hanover.
Hanover. Okay. I don't know. It says St. Simon.
It says St. Simon.
St. Simon Primary.
You can check.
Yeah. So the chairman referred to here, who did all of this, is the current chairman of the PCJ?
Yes, he is, sir.
There's a lengthy letter which precedes this listing of $15 million worth of sponsorships, which he authorized on his own, apparently. It's in very small font. I haven't had a chance to read it because it was just put before us when we arrived this morning. It says, while it is accepted that there was a deviation from PCJ's internal processes in some instances, particularly with reference to evaluation by the CAC department, the approved sponsorship policy granted the chairman the latitude to approve sponsorships above $100,000.
So is that means there's no ceiling on it? Once it's above 100,000, the chairman just has.
It doesn't say.
Absolute discretion.
Is your sponsorship policy at PCJ one which allows a chairman, a non-executive chairman, to authorize an unlimited amount of sponsorship for any one beneficiary?
Well, I wouldn't say unlimited, but it does say below 100. Below 100,000 is the GGM, and above it requires the chairman's authorization.
Does it require board approval?
It does require board approval, but it doesn't say in terms of which number, but all of them should go through board approval, at least the ones.
Yes, he goes on to say 8.9 million of this 11.6, which is actually more than 11.6, amount was paid to government agencies, and 2.7 million was to reputable clubs and societies, and so on. As far as I'm concerned, it's highly irregular to have a non-executive chairman approving millions and millions of dollars of sponsorships without board approval, by himself, without board approval and without evaluation by the relevant department. And I note that the minister has indicated that she intends to review the PCJ board. I think that was in the public domain, and I hope that that exercise will be embarked upon in short order.
While you're on this list, Homestead Society, community development organization, is this from Homestead in the minister's constituency?
Let me just check, sir. I believe it is.
You believe it is?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, perhaps you need to stop being so independent in this committee. Arnett Gardens might benefit.
Chairman, if I can, I would just want to take you to the last paragraph of page 3 of the letter. No, not Appendix 3, the letter from the chairman. Yeah, within Appendix 3, yes. On page 3 of that letter, the last paragraph.
Yes.
Just to point out that it said here that the chairman is going to take all of these sponsorships to his board to have them ratified.
Well, they're
I'm
already...
just pointing it out to you.
Yeah.
I know.
Fair enough, but not really fair enough, because that horse is long through the gate. Yeah.
And his next paragraph, which I'm only seeing now, again, distances the documentation. Well, Mr. Hadid, is distancing the PCJ board from the documentation submitted to Petrojam in relation to the donation that we were speaking about earlier. And which is in a sense confirming what was said what was reported by the permanent secretary earlier. Mr. Hadid, chairman of PCJ board, indicates that this individual, the director Lionel Meyer, was not acting in his capacity as a member of the PCJ board or based on any directive or instruction from the PCJ board, as the board had no knowledge of the referenced donation. So the chairman of PCJ is establishing some distance between their board and
the problem with that
organization.
is the email simply says it's coming from this gentleman to the Petrojam officer who received the email. But it doesn't say in what capacity he's sending it. The fact is he was a PCJ director at the time. PCJ is the parent company or corporation for Petrojam.
And it would have been reasonable.
Yeah. So there's a lot of it's very nebulous as to what capacity he was acting. It's easy to say that now that he wasn't acting as a PCJ director, but
it certainly wasn't clear then. But when he comes, we can clear up this.
All right, members, is there anything else we want to address today?
I was in between going back over this ethanol matter here. As I said, it all came here this morning. And going through some of the thing here. Ms. Smith was employed on a contract for 3 years. Is in what capacity? Is it as general manager or is it as what it says here? I see two different manager, finance and administration. Two different titles referred to in the document.
Mr. Chairman, member, she was employed, it's only recently since 2019 that she's acting as general manager. She was employed as finance and administration.
So the substantive position was the manager, finance and administration.
Yes.
And then started to act as general manager this year.
Yes.
The person who was general manager, you're on leave or something like that?
No, the substantive general manager resigned. Then there was an acting assignment from an officer from Petrojam. He did 3 months, and then he opted to return to his position fully at Petrojam, and the board did this new assignment.
But the commencement in October 2016, going back to, just reflecting back on the discussions we had with the PCJ engagements that the Auditor General referenced to, was the position of Manager Finance and Administration. How was that position filled?
As far as I'm aware, with the information I have, there is in fact no such position.
You mean, are you saying that
it's not on the establishment as I have been provided with it by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. So it's a position that has been established by the board, I would assume, because I'm still awaiting the documentation there that the minister has requested, and the person was employed.
In a position that never existed?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So all the provisions of compensation and so forth was all contrived. No, there was no position. No, I see a contract here. I see a contract here with a salary of 5.296965.84 per annum. And I see a monthly allowance, duty allowance of 25,000 per month, and a monthly transportation of 75,798, plus the other benefits, savings plan, group life insurance, medical, etc. And also a loan provision in that engagement, all on the basis of a position that don't exist.
And gratuity of 25%.
And gratuity attached to it.
25% of the gross salary earned during the period of the contract. After
successful completion.
Yes, but
after two consecutive years of work.
Upon successful completion.
Yes, upon successful completion of a probation in a position that don't exist.
Satisfactory completion.
Appendix
1. Pierce?
Yes, sir.
I would like to have your further feedback from the Ministry of Finance. And how do you resolve this situation? And the extent, or further widespread, because this was not covered in the Auditor General. Well, Auditor General reports, in all fairness, only dealt with PCJ and Petrojam, and this came to my attention otherwise, why I made the inquiry last week, and it is more alarming based on the documentation which you have facilitated, PS. So I would love to get some further update from the Ministry of Finance. How do you resolve this irregular, unauthorized employment of personnel and creation of posts? For all the years you have been a PS, people don't go about just creating positions at their convenience to employ who they want.
Well, sir, I would only say it appears that that is very possible. Where I'm coming from, it didn't obtain, but it appears to be that way. Through the minister, I have requested the documentation in relation to this employment, because we do have an access to information request, which was brought to my attention shortly after I assumed duties. And I do need the documentation to be able to answer, because I'm not prepared to answer just on what somebody tells me. So I have requested the information which the minister has written about, and I am awaiting that information. In the meantime, as I said earlier, I have had the Ministry of Finance supply me with the establishment for all entities within the portfolio, because, you know, we have to fix the bleeding of this portfolio.
Which continues?
Well, I don't know if it's continuing.
Oh, you will seek to its non-continuation.
This is now in its third year. But suffice it to say that I have been in discussions with the minister up to yesterday on this particular entity, and we will be taking steps to address the issues, which I am not prepared to divulge at this time. Suffice it to say that the actions we are taking will require us also going to the cabinet for a decision.
Thank you.
Any other business? If not, date of next meeting, next week Tuesday is available at 10 o'clock.
I'll be available. But Mr. Chairman, I regret that the member won't be here, though.
Who is not available next week, other than you? Or the government members? None of you?
No, we crave your we find quorum, only three.
It doesn't matter which was a precept.
Yeah, we'll have a quorum.
That's standing order states clearly 77 that the majority of members of a committee.
All right, you're available the following
No,
week?
don't listen to that foolishness, that he talks about composition of committee, not quorum.
Well, yes, there would be a quorum, but I think they have asked us not to sit in their absence, and I'm inclined to indulge them in the spirit of bipartisanship. Yes. With which we like to proceed. Right, Member Dunn? Right, Member Dunn?
So the spirit of cooperation.
The following week.
I would miss Member Warmington's
the 23rd of April. Would someone move for the adjournment? Thank you. Seconded.
Mr. Chairman, we'll soon need one of these trucks to help us pull out the amount of material. We need a trolley.
We need a trolley now for members to take this paper out.